So, PJ Pug-A-Pillar. Everyone knows him, everyone loves him. He's an icon, a modern hero. But despite his fame, he wasn't always the paragon everyone knows him to be. His tale is one of loss, tragedy, loneliness, friendship, and how, ultimately, love triumphs all. His story begins in a lonely barn deep within the woods. This barn was owned by two pug breeders, Benny and Ben D, who aimed for perfection. Nothing more, nothing less. On a dark, stormy night, one of their esteemed pugs gave birth to a beautiful litter of puppies, and among the puppies was a very unique dog, to say the least. Put it bluntly, he was blue.
Why are you blue?
One of the two men bore witness to the creature, and Bendy suggested marketing the dog as the barn's star attraction. Now, Bendy had his own issues regarding stardom and would go down a dark path in search of fame, but that's a story for another day. Back on track, Bendy stuck to his beliefs of flawlessness and drew out the dog with zero hesitation, in fear that it may infect the other dogs with its blue fur. This dog was PJ, who was new to the world, and the very first thing he knew was abandonment. He knew nothing of what he did wrong. He didn't understand why they would just throw him out, but he knew he wasn't wanted, so he ventured out into the wilderness. After what seemed like ages of wandering, PJ discovered a nearby town, where he made himself at home in a nearby alley. It was far from comfortable, but it was the only home PJ ever knew. After weeks of surviving off of garbage and discarded food, the town's most two notorious teenage rebels, Fred and Bon, found PJ in its box. They immediately took notice of PJ's strange blue fur and quickly began mocking him with zero remorse. They made use of spray cans they had on their person, which they had planned on using to vandalize local recluse Theodore Peterson's house. But that's a story for another day. Labeled the dog as PJ, which stood for putrid junk. They were eventually noticed by local law enforcement, most notably Officer Bobby, who was immaturely nicknamed Baldy by the local youth. And chased away. PJ was at his lowest, so he continued doing what he knew best, hiding. But fortunately for our little canine, the first good thing in his life would soon walk right on up to him, who bore the name Winston. Winston is a particularly interesting man who carried an entire documentary on his own. But this is the story of PJ, so let's set that aside for now. Winston was an everyman, but was deeply lonely and in need of companionship. So when PJ's blue fur first struck his eye, he knew he had to find what he was always looking for. Winston was the first man to show kindness to PJ, so when he brought the pup home, PJ instantly attached himself to Winston. The next year of PJ's and Winston's life was the best in either of their lives. They did everything together. They ate, played, worked, partied, and slept together. Everything was perfect until one fateful day. Unbeknownst to Winston or PJ, a certain scientist by the name of Dr. Omelette had been spying on the pair for months. Now, Dr. Omelette, before he became the world's most infamous mad scientist, which is a story for another day, had worked for Playtime Co. for many years, and he had been scouting out subjects for the newest project of the company. The blue fur of PJ's instantly stuck out to Omelette when he first laid eyes upon him, and he had tailed him ever since. One fateful day, Winston and PJ were out in the park playing in the sun, having a grand time. But unfortunately, Omelette was hot on the trail and ready to strike. Once PJ was out of Winston's sight, Omelette popped out of a bush and kidnapped PJ. Winston searched for hours, but it was of no use. Winston was heartbroken and would soon spiral out of control, eventually becoming the devil. But that's a story for another day. PJ, on the other hand, wasn't doing much better. He woke up in a dark, dirty lab, being greeted by the welcoming, gravelly voice of Omelette. Playtime Co. was already pushing Omelette to finish the project, so Omelette cut right to the chase and briefed PJ on what was about to happen. PJ would be put in the Playtime machine, where he would be transformed into Playtime's newest attraction. PJ was horrified, But Omelette, despite being evil, wasn't a monster. He presented an offer to the pup. He offered to let PJ out back into the wilderness, but told PJ that the chance of PJ ever finding Winston or any friendly face again was slim to none. But PJ could accept his role as an attraction, where he would be loved by millions. PJ deeply considered his options, and after realizing he would likely never see Winston again, he accepted becoming an experiment. Omelette quickly got to work and dropped PJ into the machine. PJ would watch in horror as his own body contorted, morphed, alien shapes for what felt like hours until he emerged as an abomination, adopting the name PJ Pug-A-Pillar. With his new identity, PJ rocketed to success as the newest member of the Playtime family. While things were good, PJ still deeply missed his owner Winston, but he made do what we had. Eventually, Playtime would soon start going under due to certain circumstances during the year 2001. But Playtime's connection to the events of 9/11 is a story for another day. After going bankrupt, Playtime decided to lock away their creations deep within the Playtime factory to hide evidence of their crimes, leaving them to fend for themselves. PJ was left behind, where he realized he was merely a slave to the factory line. Scared and alone, he fell back to his old habits of hiding and running. After years of crippling isolation, the factory was visited by a past employee in search of his fellow co-workers. This employee would cause a stir around the factory and would soon face PJ. PJ meant no harm, but when faced with his stranger, he decided to play a game of red light, green light with him. His favorite game to play with Winston. This was the most joy PJ had felt in ages, but it didn't last long, as the stranger soon broke out and began starting the train in the game station in search of an escape. PJ followed them in desperation for more playtime and crawled aboard the train. The stranger assumed PJ was attacking them and panicked, crashing the train into play care. PJ fortunately survived the crash, and seeing an exit within reach, he made his way out of the factory through the tunnel, finally free. PJ immediately began searching for Winston. After months of non-stop searching, PJ would find Winston alone in a motel room. While PJ had been at the factory, Winston had been fighting Benny and his band as the devil. But that's a story for another day. Winston has since recovered and went into hiding at a motel, where he was reunited with PJ once again. But Winston had long believed PJ to be dead, so when he saw this monster at his doorstep, he denounced the creature and shooed it away. Despite PJ's efforts to remind Winston of their companionship, Winston only saw him as a monster and constantly kicked him away. PJ was devastated and contemplated leaving Winston to his own vices. But after finding a dog bed with his name PJ at the local playground, he had the idea to show the bed to Winston to bring him to his senses. Once Winston saw the bed, he knew what PJ was trying to tell him and instantly embraced PJ. After many years of separation and heartbreak, Winston and PJ were finally reunited once again, where they will live out the rest of their lives happily ever after. Thus concluding PJ's tale, it was a story of heartbreak, tragedy, also an inspirational story of perseverance and the ultimate power of love. PJ is the best of us, and I hope by sharing this story, others will be inspired to be kind to those around them, as you never know if the person or dog next to you might be your future best friend. Or maybe PJ was killed and whipped by Mother Longlegs. I don't know, both are equally possible.